Welcome back, beautiful tri-state area. You're listening to A Moment of Zen right here on 710 WOR, the voice of New York, iHeartRadio. This is the Hydration with Heart segment brought to you by Once Upon a Coconut. I'm your host, Zen Sams. Today we have the perfect blend of hydration and inspiration. And tonight's topic is one that's both profound and universal: death. But don't turn that dial just yet. Our guest tonight is here to show us that understanding death can actually teach us how to live more fully. Joining me is Julie McFadden, better known to her millions of followers as Hospice Nurse Julie. She's a hospice and palliative care nurse with over 15 years of experience, a social media star, and the author of her book, Nothing to Fear: Demystifying Death to Live More Fully. She's here to help us break the taboos, demystify stigmas, address our fears, and give us the tools to navigate end-of-life care with grace and acceptance. Get ready for a conversation that will definitely challenge your perceptions and leave you feeling empowered. Welcome to the show, superstar.
Hello, thank you. What an intro.
So excited to have you on. Your story, my dear, is so inspiring. I mean, you've spent years working at the intersection of life and death, witnessing the beauty and pain of those final moments. And it truly does take a special kind of courage and compassion to do what you do. But let's go back to the beginning. What drew you to this line of work? And was there a defining moment that inspired you to not only become a hospice nurse, but to write Nothing to Fear?
Yes, so I've been a nurse for over 15 years, and that first part of my career was in the ICU, and which is like where you're keeping people alive at all cost. And my second year into that, just 2 years into it, I still stayed for another 6, which is another story. But those 2 years, I started seeing how keeping someone alive at all cost was causing more suffering, and we weren't talking about it. No one was saying anything about it. And I eventually started to. So I had a patient that really changed the view of what we were doing there. I felt like death was not the worst possible outcome for this patient. And it was the first time I spoke up, and it really made a difference. The family did end up turning off machines for this patient, and the patient did die. And it was a sad, scary moment for me because I felt like I was the one who, you know, caused, in quotations, that. But it also helped me see how I could be an advocate. And there is a way, and we're all going to die, right? And if that is the case, we need to start talking about it so people can die how they choose. Maybe not be in a hospital hooked to machines trying to keep them alive if the outcome is going to be death no matter what in their case. So that drew me to hospice nursing. 8 years later. It took me 8 years, but I eventually did it.
I love that you're turning your experiences into a resource for others, and your passion really shines through in your work. Truly remarkable stuff. Now,
Thank you.
death anxiety, just hearing those words gives many of us pause. So, studies show that fear of death is one of the most common anxieties worldwide, and yet it's something we all must face. And in your experience, Julie, why do people have such a hard time discussing death and dying? And how can we really begin to overcome this discomfort?
Yes. So my book is called Nothing to Fear. However, I wanted it to be called initially Normal to Fear. So to me, it's not about like, don't fear death. It's about it's the great unknown. It's scary. It's sad. There's so many uncomfortable feelings around it. But what I've learned from being around hundreds, if not thousands of dying people is that the ones that were dying in the family around them, the ones that were willing to talk about it, to say the truth about it, even if it was, I don't want to, I'm angry that I'm dying, I'm angry this is happening, they seemed to be able to live better because they weren't dead yet, right? They seemed to live better and die more peacefully. So why do we fear it? I think it's the great unknown. And just because we fear it doesn't mean we don't need to talk about it and plan for it. And if we do, it doesn't mean it's going to happen faster. In fact, it usually seems to alleviate the fear, even just for a bit, just for a bit. And we all need to
So
start doing it.
important.
Yeah.
So important to start normalizing death, and that
Yeah.
makes so much sense, and breaking those barriers is really gonna be what changes the way we approach life itself, right?
Yes, yes, yes.
Now, your social media presence is nothing short of incredible, over 3 million followers. Congratulations, you're
Thank you.
officially an influencer.
Right? It's crazy.
You found a whole new way to connect with people on such an intimate and challenging topic. And social media is often seen as a place for escapism, yet
Yeah.
you've made it a platform for education and healing. What motivated you to start sharing your insights online? And do you think platforms like Instagram make these conversations more accessible for people?
Yes. I mean, I am just as surprised as anyone else. I am 42 years old, just so you know. I started doing this 3 years ago, kind of on a whim, and it just took off on TikTok first, which is hilarious because I think I was 39 at the time, and to be taking off on TikTok was like, "What is happening?" I got on initially just to watch my nieces, like, do dances, you know? And I think there's something to be said about that. You know, in my day-to-day real life, my friends and family didn't necessarily want to hear about my job as a hospice nurse, right? But there seems to be something about the internet, and maybe there's like, because I'm not face to face with them in real life, maybe it's easier to take in the information. But you know, that first video I did, um, kind of on a whim. There was no plan. I didn't have like multiple videos recorded. They were in bad lighting, and it was just sort of me turning on my camera and talking about the things I know. I think it took like 3 or 4 videos, and my page just started going viral. And it just kept happening on all different platforms. So it's something people want to talk about and learn about, whether they admit that or not. So,
Yeah.
you know, I just keep
Girl, you're getting a lot of help from the other side. I have to
Oh
say
my
that.
gosh, I hope
You're getting a
so.
ton of
I
help.
hope so.
Uh,
Yeah.
well, it's so refreshing to see social media being used for something so meaningful. I love it. Many people don't really understand hospice care, right?
Yeah.
Until they're faced with it for themselves or a loved one. But preparation is key. So, what are some of the most important questions people should ask when considering hospice care? And why is it so critical to address these earlier on?
Yes, hospice is not a bad word, and people think hospice is about dying, and I mean this with my whole heart when I say hospice is about living. Hospice is about living. Unfortunately, we live in bodies in a world that will die, right? And some of us will get diagnoses that we know, like, okay, this is incurable. I'm likely going to die from this disease sometime, right? And I think what we need to start asking ourselves is, if we know we're going to die, which we all are, how do we want that to look? How do we want that to look? Do we want to be in a hospital? Do we want to, quote unquote, fight, you know, to the very end, whatever that means for you? Or do you want to be with your family, be in your own bed, have your pain managed? You know, and really it's all up to you, but just have an idea of what you'd want your death to look like. If you could control that, which some of us can't, right? But if you could, how do you want it to look? And we need to start preparing and planning for it. We plan for everything in life: weddings, birthdays, vacations. Why are we not planning about the thing that's going to happen to us all? You know, we need to start talking about it and planning. And when you plan, you live better and you die better. I promise. I see it with my own eyes.
Such valuable advice, Julie. And it's
Thank you.
empowering to know what to ask so families can make informed decisions, right? It's
Yes.
truly important. Now, one of the most profound ideas in your book is that death isn't the worst possible outcome, like you've repeated on this interview. That's a radical shift from how many of us think. If not death, then what is the worst possible outcome?
Suffering. Suffering. And when we try to preserve life at all cost, you will suffer. End of story, period. I've seen it with my own eyes over and over and over again as an ICU nurse. We caused, and again, we're doing wonderful things in our health in healthcare, right? And that's why people are living longer, and death does seem like it doesn't happen, right? And so there's a part of it that's amazing, and then we just take it too far. We just take it too far sometimes, and it causes a lot of suffering.
Wow, that's powerful. It really makes you think about the choices we make in our lives
Yes.
and how we define, quote unquote, living well.
Yes.
Now,
Exactly.
you've talked about deathbed phenomena and these experiences that can seem almost mystical or spiritual. For some, this might sound a little eerie, but it's actually quite common. Can you share a few examples of this and explain what they mean in the context of the dying process?
Yes. So coming from an ICU nurse to a hospice nurse, when I started seeing these deathbed phenomena, which you do, it's undeniable as a hospice nurse, I was like, what the heck is going on here? And really, we don't have answers. There aren't real scientific answers for the deathbed phenomena. But the two I see the most is the rally or the surge. The real name is called terminal lucidity, which is when someone looks like they are going to die, maybe any minute. They have been unconscious for 4 days. And then suddenly, boom, they wake up. They have a great day. Maybe they get out of bed. They say they're hungry. They eat a burger. Their personality comes back. And you're like, wow, this is a miracle. They're back. They're here. They're going to live. And then they die shortly after. So it's like a gift because you get this last hurrah. But if you don't know what it is, and you're not expecting it, it can be very devastating because then they die shortly after. So that's one that we see the most. The second one is visioning. People seeing dead relatives, dead loved ones, dead old pets, neighbors, and they'll have full conversations with them. Patients have told me countless times, my parents came to me last night. They said they're coming to get me soon. Not yet, but it's all going to be okay. And they'll let me know when it's time. And this has happened like countless times. And they are alert. And the people who are telling me this are alert and oriented. They're not like taking their last breath. They're like walking around and just as lucid as you and I.
Wow.
I know. It is wow. And there's no real explanation. We don't really know. There's theories and things, but we don't really know scientifically why it's happening. We just know it does.
It's a reminder that even at the end of life, there can be moments of wonder and connection, and that is the transition. They're transitioning. When my dad passed away in 2016 from aggressive lung cancer, the day prior to him passing away was exactly what you described. And hospice for him was at my sister's house. And he had this great burst of energy, and then the next day, that was it. It was just like he had enough energy to muster up what he could to talk to everybody and
Oh,
make that last moment count. And yeah, so yeah, you're spot
yes.
on.
Yes.
Now, you say that information is power when it comes to the dying process, and I couldn't agree more. Knowledge can ease so much fear. What are some of the key pieces of information that families and patients should know about this process?
Oh, the first one is the body knows how to die. We are biologically built to be born and grow and live, and biologically built to die. And the body knows how to do it literally. It has built in mechanisms to help us do it. So if you're dying a natural death, meaning you're dying from something, but you're naturally allowing the process to take over, our bodies have built in mechanisms to help us do that. Switches off the hunger and thirst mechanism, switches up the sleep mechanism. So that's why people dying sleep a lot and don't eat and drink. Sleep a lot and don't eat and drink. So the less we mess with that process, the better it usually goes and the more peaceful it usually goes. So that's the most fascinating thing to me that I didn't even know as an ICU nurse. But you see it so often as a hospice nurse. It's like people need to know this. People need to know that our bodies are built to help us die. And it's there for us. It's there for us at the end.
Such practical advice, Julie. And you're giving people a sense of control
Yes.
during a time that often feels overwhelming and things are just spiraling out of control. So
Yes.
kudos to you. Now,
Thank
one of
you.
the most memorable takeaways from your book is the importance of preparation, like sharing passwords before someone passes.
Yes.
It's such a simple yet profound idea. So if you had to pick the top 3 things everyone should do before they die, what would they be?
Oh wow. Okay, top 3 things. Fill out an advance directive stating very specific circumstances of what you would want versus what you wouldn't want. Meaning like if I have a brain aneurysm and I'm not conscious, like do you want a feeding tube or don't you want a feeding tube? So specific things like that that you fill out an advance directive. Always have a beneficiary to your banks and the money you have or your estate, like somehow get an estate planner, a lawyer, something like that to help you tie up loose ends before you die, even if you think you don't have things to give to people. Believe me, you do. And it's going to leave a lot of work for them if you don't get it if you don't get it tied up nice and pretty before you die. Share your passwords to all of your banks and your phones and your emails to at least one trusted person. And then I think the fourth, is get your funeral or mortuary plans in order.
Well said. Well, thank you for joining us and for sharing your incredible insights. You've given us so much to think about, and I know our listeners and viewers are walking away feeling inspired and informed, and that's what's key because knowledge is power. So thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Now, for those of you that want to learn more, Julie's book, Nothing to Fear, Demystifying Death to Live More Fully, it was out on June 11th of this year. Be sure to follow her on social media at Hospice Nurse Julie and visit her website at hospicenursejulie.com. This is the Hydration with Heart segment brought to you by Once Upon a Coconut. I'm your host, Zen Sams, right here on A Moment of Zen on 710 WOR, the voice of New York, iHeartRadio. Stay hydrated, stay inspired, and join us on the next segment of Hydration with Heart for more conversations that matter. We'll be right back after this.
A Moment of Zen is brought to you by Once Upon a Coconut.
Discover the refreshing taste of 100% pure coconut water that actually tastes great. Naturally sweet with no artificial flavors or added sugar. It's packed with electrolytes to keep you hydrated throughout your day. And with 10% of profits going to charity, every sip makes a difference. Pure taste, pure goodness. Experience nature's Gatorade. Visit Once Upon a Coconut or naturesgatorade.com.